Hello again, everyone. It's me, MadameMacabre. First of all, I must apologize for the sound of my voice. Again, I have come down with a really awful cold, but I still want to be able to bring you guys content, so I'm going to just sound a little bit huskier today since I'm right on the borderline of losing my voice entirely. So I think the huskier sound can still work. Well, I can still talk anyway. With that out of the way, once again today I have yet another viewer submission to share with you all. Today's story comes from PhantaBunn, where she shares 2 personal, terrifying experiences. Are you guys ready? Hi, madam. I'm PhantaBunn, a big fan and longtime listener, and I have 2 personal experiences I've had with what I believe to be, at least in the realm of the paranormal, if not outright malevolent spirits. I've always been a bit sensitive when it comes to the paranormal, with a few instances sticking out in particular. I'm currently in high school, and this first one happened in the past. For a bit of background, I am an ex-military kid and have moved all over the United States, so the longest I've stayed in one spot was 4 years. I also completely suffer from anxiety and depression, possibly triggered by another psychological condition I've had since birth. Anyway, when it comes to these stories, the first sticks out in particular because after all these years, I honestly still feel haunted by it. I was around 9 or 10 at the time, and I was having a rough time with school and family issues. One night, I fell asleep while my parents, now divorced, were having yet another argument. I remember that night was particularly exhausting, and it didn't take a long time for me to fall into a fitful sleep. I'm really not sure how to explain this next part, but I'll try to retell it to the best of my ability. I remember first waking up and hearing what sounded like echoing children's laughter, the really creepy kind. At the time, I was an only child, so this was initially intimidating. I sat up in my bed and looked around my room. Everything seemed normal. That is, until I looked at the window, which I distinctly remember having covered with the blinds. Confused, I walked a little closer, but the harder I looked, the more uneasy I became as I could see what looked like hundreds of thousands of glowing dots, like eyes, peering at me through the darkness. Now, thoroughly freaked out, I left the room in a flurry and ran through the hall, hoping my dad might be watching TV and could help in some way. However, the second I exited into the split living room/kitchen area, my heart dropped. There were more eyes in every window I could see. And if that weren't frightening enough, there were also faint, wispy tendrils of something like a dark mist, darker than the shadows, reaching out from every corner as that impish laughter got louder and louder and seemingly started to surround me. In a panic, I ran back through the hallway, scraping my foot badly on the heater grate placed on the walls as I did. I locked myself in my room, closed the blinds, and hid under the covers like any child terrified out of their mind would do. I eventually managed to drift back to sleep, although I thought I could feel a faint tugging at the corner of my blanket. When I woke up the next morning, I was absolutely ready to pass the whole thing off as just a bad nightmare, if not to just admit it didn't actually happen. And for a moment, this seemed plausible, seeing as the room was exactly how I left it when I initially went to bed the previous night. No eyes, no smoky tendrils. Just as I was about to happily write it all off as yes, indeed, just a terrible nightmare, all of this went out the window when I stepped out of the bed and saw my scratched up foot. If it was just a dream, that wouldn't have been there. Being young and overwhelmed by everything, ultimately, I decided not to tell my parents. They already had more than enough stress in their lives, and I didn't want to add to it with something that they would most likely write off as childish and silly anyways. So far since this incident, I have been able to move on fairly well without much incident. However, I have to admit now that as soon as the sun goes down, I make sure to double check that all the windows are indeed covered, even at sleepovers. Okay, now fast forward a few years, and our family is now living on the Columbia River in a tiny town originally settled by Native Americans. The community is generally safe and tranquil, without any major crimes actively taking place. The entire county is mostly rural forest, and nothing really happens out of the ordinary here, aside from a neighbor's cow getting loose or someone's relative passing away. That being said, I've picked up on a lot of strange energy here, especially in my own backyard. See, I think there's at least one entity living just outside my house, and it's kind of scary sometimes. I'm honestly kind of scared that it might be a Wendigo or a skinwalker, as the warning signs add up each time something happens. Animal remains, a sudden freezing cold flash, a horrible rotten stench in the air, strange noises at ungodly hours, vocal mimicking, and the land formerly having belonged to an old native tribe that has long since been sadly wiped out. Anyway, one summer, my cousin and I went about a mile or two into the woods when we started getting a really bad feeling. Several trees were damaged by what we could only rationalize as some sort of massive elk. But that didn't really make sense since it wasn't the time of year for that animal to even be present in the area. Thoroughly unnerved, we decided to head back to the house, looking over our shoulders every step of the way. Now, we had gone about a mile off our property line, which is populated by very dense and difficult to navigate forests with lots of hills. And to be honest, my cousins and I were the only ones in the family to have ever gone that far ourselves, meaning no one else was familiar with the land, which makes the next part honestly chilling. About a half mile from the property line, an awful smell comes over us, and suddenly we hear my grandfather, who is 70 years old with a bum knee, calling our names loud and clear. Let me make this readily apparent. There was absolutely no way my grandfather could get out there, and at this point, we just booked it home until we reached the property marker. The really eerie thing is, the second we crossed over, the smell and chill both passed as we were left panting, wondering what the hell we just experienced. Since then, I fear it may have gotten bold enough to climb onto our property. 2 years have passed, and one night I opened the door to let my dog out to pee. It was about 3 a.m, and the air felt below freezing. As I shivered in the doorway, I started getting a really bad feeling, just a malevolent, oppressive energy. Suddenly, my dog snarled at something in the woods like crazy, then tucked his tail and ran inside when the creature made a sound unlike any I have ever heard before in my life. I'm not really sure how exactly to explain it, but it sounded kind of like a mountain lion scream mixed with 2 pieces of steel screeching together, and it sounded to be about only 20 feet away at the edge of the tree line. I slammed and locked the door, checked my dog for injuries, and let him sleep in my room with me that night. I don't know what specifically this thing is, but whatever it is, I don't think it means well by any means. The real tragedy in all this is I love that forest more than I can express. I love to explore, but I haven't gone down there since that night. I've blessed and protected my space with incense and protective stones and can only hope for the best from here. I'll go ahead and attach a photo of the woods I reference so you can understand a little more clearly what I'm working with here. Anyway, I really hope you've enjoyed reading 2 of my many strange experiences. Say hello to Artemis and Apollo from my kitties Tug and Tia. Sincerely, PhantaBunn. Okay, wow. So those are 2 vastly different experiences, so that's actually interesting. You're definitely right, they do sound paranormal in nature, but don't really seem to be similar types of entities at all. I'll be honest, I personally haven't experienced anything like the first story, with the eyes and the tendrils in the windows, and the impish laughter. I know there are various different spirits that can do mischievous, playful things like the laughter, but the eyes and the tendrils, that's a little weird. I think I may need to leave this one up to the audience to diagnose. All that being said, my Irish blood can't help but scream to me that this kind of sounds like the territory of the Fae. I know that doesn't really do much to help narrow things down, but unfortunately I'm not as well versed on this stuff as I wish, and since my great-grandmother passed away when I was pretty little, I can't consult to her for her opinion anymore. So alas, if any of you listening to this have ideas what this could be or have experienced something similar, please feel free to share down below. And as for that second story, yeah, I sadly think you pretty much hit the nail on the head with the Wendigo theory. That sounds downright textbook Wendigo case. I think it's for the best that you're staying out of the woods and protecting yourself. An interesting thing to note with Wendigos, however, is they seem to show observable cases of hibernation and migratory behavior. So they may be in your area for a month or two at a time and gone for another. I'd say continue being cautious for safety, but if things get worse, maybe seek out a local expert. Alright, you guys, we made it to the end, and my voice is literally just about to stop working altogether, so that's all I have time and the physical capability to get through today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you all again next time with another video. Until then, remember, stay creepy.